Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Mackenzie Garza, and I am the Executive Director of the Southern Arizona Division of the American Heart Association. The American Heart Association and Banner University Health Plans have joined forces across the state of Arizona with the goal to improve overall heart and physical health for families in our communities. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Today's discussion is a webinar format, but we definitely want it to be interactive. So even though we can't see you, we'd love to hear from you throughout the discussion. So please find the chat button and any questions or comments in the chat box, and just make sure to choose everyone from the drop-down menu so everyone can see any comments or questions that you have. It's now my pleasure to introduce our sponsor, moderator, and first speaker for today's discussion. Dr. Sandra Stein has been with Banner for the last 6 years, where she currently serves as the Chief Medical Officer for Banner Plans and Networks. Dr. Stein, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Mackenzie. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us at our nutrition security discussion and collaboration with the American Heart Association. Today is the first in a series of focused community conversations titled Nutrition and the Heart. Through our work with the American Heart Association, we're committed to address nutrition and food insecurity in our communities. According to the Arizona Department of Economic Security's Council, 1 in 6 Arizonians is affected by food insecurity, and an alarming 500,000 Arizonians will face a diet-related illness by 2030. Our conversation today hopes to begin a dialogue around these very serious issues. We'll examine the importance of nutrition in terms of whole person health. We'll learn about what is good nutrition and how to access healthy food. And finally, we'll examine the systems in place to work toward that addressing nutritional insecurity. With that, I'm going to kick us off with a quick overview of heart disease. Heart disease and risk factors. Next slide, please. So I'm going to cover some basic information. What is heart disease? We're going to cover the 6 main categories, the types of heart disease, heart attack and warning signs, because these are critical things for you to be aware of. Risk factors, because there's some that we really can have a profound impact on, and a wide array of resources. Next slide, please. So heart disease is the #1 killer of adults in the United States. So this information is absolutely critical. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. There we go. So what is heart disease? A simple term to describe several types of problems. We go back a slide, right? Several types of problems related to the heart. You can also use the term cardiovascular disease, and that includes diseases that involve the heart and or blood vessels. Next slide. So these are the 6 key types of heart disease. And I'm going to go over really high level. Coronary heart disease is narrowing of the vessels due to plaques. So we're going to talk more about that in a couple of slides. Heart failure is insufficient blood being pumped, and the heart is a muscle. It has to be able to squeeze, and if it doesn't squeeze, the blood can't get to the rest of the body. Irregular heartbeat due to electrical problems. If you see the EKG script at the bottom of the screen, our heart should beat at a regular rate and rhythm, but with electrical problems, we don't see that. Heart valve disease, sometimes doctors can hear a murmur on an exam, and those valves may be leaky, so the blood goes back and forth when it shouldn't. Cardiomyopathy is muscle disease, and I already told you the heart is a muscle, so it doesn't have that squeeze the way it's supposed to. And congenital defects at birth. Next slide, please. So this is a nice picture of the overall anatomy, particularly the blood and circulation to the heart. What I want to focus on is the bottom right, the coronary arteries. The coronary arteries supply blood and oxygen to the muscles of the heart, and they are absolutely critical to heart health. Next slide, please. So arteriosclerosis, you can see on the left, this is a normal artery that has a very significant diameter, so blood should be able to flow through that easily. If you look on the right at this vessel that has plaque, there's a very narrow space, so it's much more difficult for blood to flow through that and get to the heart. Next slide, please. So heart attack warning signs, you all should be aware of all of these. The most common ones are chest discomfort, lightheadedness, nausea or vomiting, jaw, neck, or back pain, discomfort in the upper body, and shortness of breath. And there's some differences between men and women. And some of the key things, women tend to feel faint, have difficulty feeling indigestion or heartburn, and sometimes feel extreme fatigue. What's critical here is if you or somebody around you has these symptoms, call 911 when any of these appear, because time is of the essence. Next slide, please. So sudden cardiac arrest and CPR, or cardiopulmonary resuscitation. What I want you to know is CPR saves lives. It takes about 2.5 to 3+ hours, depending on the training, to get basic CPR trained. Now look at these stats. The number of people who have cardiac arrest in Arizona each year, 5K, a huge number. Now look at this, the percentage of people who die after suffering and out of the hospital, cardiac arrest, 90%, 9 out of 10. And as we continue to look at this data, it's striking. The percentage of out of hospital cardiac arrests that happen in homes and residential settings, 70%, the vast majority. And the percentage of people who experience out of hospital cardiac arrest and get immediate help before professionals arrive is only about 40%. So we really need more individuals trained in CPR, because CPR saves lives. And there's some information in that link. I hope you'll use that. Next slide, please. So uncontrollable risk factors, these are ones that you should be aware of, but you can't do anything about. As we get older, that's a risk. If you're male, if you have a family history of heart disease, race, and a history of prior heart disease. Next slide, please. But these are the major controllable risk factors, and each and every one of us can have a profound impact on our risks. The high risks are smoking, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, physical inactivity. We all have to be mobile. There's different ways to move our bodies, but we have to find a way that we enjoy. Obesity and diabetes. And as you can see, many of these are very interrelated. So other risk factors, alcohol and drugs. If you don't drink, please don't start drinking. If you do drink, always make sure that you drink in moderation. And illegal drugs have a profound impact on the cardiovascular system. Now, nutrition is absolutely critical. Regardless of the genetic predisposition and those risk factors that we can't control, your diet and lifestyle have a huge impact on your blood pressure and your heart health. And stress certainly does as well. And we all need to think about how we can manage our stress. Stress increases the risk for heart disease and diabetes. Can you go back, please? Great. And diabetes and blood pressure and disability and substance use and premature death eventually. So we have to all figure out ways that we can manage to decrease our stress. Some of us walk, some of us exercise, some of us meditate. There are many things. Here are some key resources. I'm not going to read them all to you, but what I wanted you to see in this first one is you can assess your risk factors and get your heart score very easily by going to this link, My Life Check, and I'm going to encourage all of you to do this. These other links we'll be sending out to you. Next slide, please. So food versus nutritional insecurity. Food security, having enough food and not having to choose between food and other basic needs like shelter. Nutritional security, getting enough healthy food consistently and putting that food to the best use. Not only what to eat, but where to find it and how to prepare it. So as you look at that bullseye in the middle, that's where you have nutritional security, where you have healthy food and you have it consistently available. People can access it and utilize it. Next slide, please. So how many people are impacted? The short answer is many. I'm going to give you a little bit more detail. In the US, an estimated 10.5% of our overall population is food insecure. And that number is just astounding to me. We see that almost 42 million people in the US receive SNAP food assistance, and 2/3 of participants are in families with children. And here you can see that 30 million children in the US were enrolled in the free or reduced price school lunch program in 2019. So there are resources. Next slide. So nutritional security is a huge health equity issue. Food insecurity in the United States by race. Look at this. Black households were at about 22%. Hispanic households about 17%, and white households about 7%. So you can see it's about 1/3 of Black households. Next slide, please. So why are there these disparities? Now, I want you to know that data without context can be damaging to communities. But there is often a systemic reason for disparities. Some of them include limited income. If you don't have income, you don't have the opportunities to buy healthy food often. Lack of transportation is a huge challenge, or relying on public transportation to go grocery shopping is very difficult. Also living in a food desert. And these are often the result of historical policies and or racism. Next slide, please. So the health impacts of food insecurity. 50%, about half of cardiovascular disease, is due to poor diet. So we hope we can have an impact on that. And inadequate intake of nutrients has many, many adverse outcomes. Increased risk of chronic diseases, increased risk of negative pregnancy outcomes even, and certain long-term deficits for children for their socio-emotional, cognitive, and motor functioning, which can be really profound and have lifelong impact. And increased risk for negative mental health impacts, most commonly anxiety, depression, and substance use. Next slide, please. Now it's my honor to turn it over to Bonnie. She's going to talk about, she's an experienced registered dietitian who's certified in diabetes and an educational specialist. And Bonnie Stone has a tremendous amount of expertise. I have to tell you from my personal experience, I have learned a lot of information from Bonnie that I have passed on to my 3 daughters. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Bonnie.
Thank you, Dr. Stein, and thank you all for being here. One thing I did want to bring up about food insecurity is our most recent data is really from around 2020. And just think of what's happened in the past 3 years. I think we have much more food insecurity now than we did then. People just can't afford to buy food like they used to. So my objectives are to talk about what is a healthy diet and provide some dietary models that provide improvement for heart health. Also the Salty 6, and then some resources you can use later to get more information. So what is a healthy diet? We've all heard eat more of the fruits and vegetables, the whole grains, poultry and fish, nuts and legumes, the good oils like olive oil, avocado oil, peanut oil, and lean meats. And then we have the big red column here, they eat less of. So let's do a quick deep dive. Why do we want to eat less of these foods? The saturated fat, trans fat, the sodium, fatty red meat, sweet, sugary drinks. First of all, we want to eat foods in the more natural state, because the more they're processed, the more they're going to cause things like inflammation in your body, which also then increases heart disease and vessel disease and causes diabetes and other illnesses, cancer. Our diet has really changed since the 1940s. So to give you an idea, we started making trans fat and artificial saturated fats way back when we started making oleo. What that is you take an oil and you bombard it with hydrogen atoms, and it turns to a fat that is solid at room temperature. So if you're wondering, what is a saturated fat? What is a trans fat? Look at fats that are solid at room temperature. You could see the fat on that meat, right? It's solid at room temperature. You could see Crisco is solid at room temperature. Okay, those type of fats are very damaging to the body, really. Trans fats, for instance, are fats that are used because they're cheap and they don't degrade fast. So if you buy a bag of cookies today and you put them in your cookie jar, the bag says good until January 25th. Okay, well, that's 6 months away. How many of you make cookies from scratch and then put a little note on there and expect them to last for 6 months? It doesn't happen. The trans fats make food last longer, but they also cause more damage to the body. Sugary drinks and sweets basically cause obesity, which in turn then is going to increase your risk for diabetes and is going to increase your heart disease risk. So let's go into this in a little more detail. How can you eat a healthy diet? There's so many choices at the grocery store. What do we buy? Do we buy quick and easy? Do we buy things that we have to prepare at home? The best thing you can do is buy food in its most natural state. For instance, a potato versus potato chips, and you cook that with your meal and you're getting good potassium, good fiber, other vitamins. You're buying the lean meats, the chicken, the fish. The fish is, as we know, is very high in omega-3 fatty acids, which are heart healthy. They tend to reduce that inflammation. They lower your bad cholesterol and they increase the good cholesterol in your body. So now you're talking about food as medicine. Cooking more often at home, you're going to get less calories, you're going to get less salt, you're going to get less sugar because you are in control of what you're putting into that. And even with a busy schedule, there are things that can help you now, such as pre-chopped vegetables sometimes. The Instapot is one of my favorites. I can't believe I could put vegetables and fish in there and set it for 2 minutes and I have a meal ready to go in 15 minutes. So think of some of those things for getting healthy food into your diet. And you're eating out in restaurants, plan ahead. Look at the menu ahead of time. Get an idea of what you want to eat. Order the foods with more vegetables and with less sauces. Salads are always a good idea. Watch the dressings. Those are where the extra calories come from. And when you're shopping, we always say shop the perimeter of the store first. That's where you're going to have your healthy, most basic food, because you start with the produce and then you go to the dairy and then you go to the meats and fish. And then you're at the frozen section, which lots of times has frozen whole foods. Okay, so what are some of the dietary models that are good for heart healthy eating? Vegan, vegetarian, and meals without meat are always a good choice because you're going to get less saturated fat and you're getting more of the vegetables and the grains and the fiber. And the Mediterranean diet, which we'll show in a minute, it's not necessarily a diet, it's a way of eating for people who live around the Mediterranean area. And what was discovered over 50 years ago was people that lived in these areas had much lower heart disease. So there was more research into these diets to find out what indeed is the magic formula. Well, the magic formula is they basically eat whole and fresh foods. I just came back from Italy and I was amazed at every meal was cooked fresh. We had fresh cooked vegetables, we had fresh made pasta. There was not a lot of meat in the meals. If you might have the equivalent of 1 ounce that was mixed in with sauces for other things. And then the DASH diet, that was a diet, that was a study that was looked at about 50 years ago also, saying, what is there in food that can lower blood pressure? So they did a study where they had people eat so many servings of fruits and vegetables a day, whole grains like the whole wheat, the whole barley, the oatmeal, low-fat dairy and yogurt, and then fish and chicken and some eggs, but very minimal amounts of sugars and fats. And they've asked the people following this not to do any other alterations because they wanted to see if diet alone, the food alone, did help. And indeed it did. And then adding exercise to that, you're just making a healthier choice to lower your blood pressure. So all of these are things that you can do with your diet. You may not want to be vegetarian, but think of having meals without meat at times. You know, this is not the best example, but macaroni and cheese with vegetables is a vegetarian meal that even kids will eat. Try looking at using more vegetables and more grains and things you already make. Like if you're making spaghetti sauce, load it up with extra vegetables. If you're making soup, add in extra vegetables, add those healthy grains in. You'd be surprised at how filling those are. All right. So like I said, a vegetarian or even a vegan plant-based meal way of eating can be healthy, but many people don't understand what that consists of and what work that involves unless they read about it. Just because you cut out meat does not make you a healthy vegetarian. You need to make sure you're balancing your protein and getting good protein sources too. For instance, if you combine beans and rice together, you're making a complete protein that is as good as meat protein. So those are the types of things that vegetarians who are serious about using this lifestyle need to learn. And you don't need to be a strict vegetarian to improve your diet. Just give up some of that meat and use more of the combinations. Okay, so what's a Mediterranean diet? The emphasis is really on vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans, and legumes. So you're eating a lot more in the way of soups and stews and lentil dishes and fruits for dessert. When you look at your bread products, for instance, when you're reading the label and you look at a brown loaf of bread that says wheat bread, look at the label and make sure it says whole wheat as the first ingredient. Lots of times you just have enriched wheat flour with coloring and a little bit of whole wheat added. But we want those whole foods. Okay, include low-fat dairy products, the yogurt, small amounts of cheese, low-fat milk. And then as far as your oils go, we're looking at things like olive oil, peanut oil, avocado oil, and the reason why is those oils are high in something called MUFAs, or monounsaturated fatty acids. Those have been shown to decrease inflammation, I'm sorry. They've been shown to decrease inflammation in the body, which directly causes heart disease and other problems. And they actually balance your blood lipids. They increase the good lipids and they decrease the bad lipids. And then limit the added sugars, sugary food, sugary beverages. If any of you are sitting there with a can of soda or a sweetened iced tea right now, take a look at the back of the label. And on the label under sugars, for the number of grams of sugar you see, divide that by 5. 5 grams of sugar is the same sugar in a teaspoon of sugar or in a sugar packet. A lot of those drinks have the equivalent of 15 packets of sugar. And if you were sitting down in a restaurant with unsweetened iced tea, would you be adding 15 packets of sugar? Probably not, but the manufacturers do. So read labels, look at the whole foods, look at different ways of cooking, and look at food as medicine. Okay, the DASH diet, I've kind of already covered that. It's very similar, has similarities to the Mediterranean diet in that you're emphasizing again the fruits and the vegetables, and again the nutrients are the things that actually help you lower the blood pressure, improve the heart health. So I didn't talk about nuts and seeds, but things like your chia seeds, your sunflower seeds, the walnuts, the almonds in small quantities, because they are high in fat, and small quantities are very helpful because they're so high in fiber, magnesium, and they're a good source of protein. You don't need much though, a little goes a long way. Okay, here we have the salty 6. And it's amazing, unless you're reading a label, you don't know how much salt is in food. And people really don't know how much salt they should have. So let's start with the recommendation of 2,300 milligrams a day. And an easy way to do that is divide that by 3 meals. Most of us eat 3 meals. So we're looking at about 700 to 800 milligrams of sodium per meal. Well, when you look at bread, you might be surprised to find out that a slice of bread, a bagel, whatever, some of those can be as high as 250 milligrams of sodium. You put 2 pieces together for a sandwich, you have 500 right there out of your 700 or 800. You add the lunch meats, which are very salty, usually about 300 to 400 milligrams per serving, and a piece of cheese. And right there, you're topping sometimes 800 or 900 milligrams of sodium. Same thing with pizza because of the salted meats on it, the cheese. If you get frozen pizza, it's a good way to see what pizza has in it. Turn it over, read the label, see what an average serving has, and see how that fits into your diet. This is also a good way to fit frozen meals into your diet if you need to use those and you want some of the healthier meals. Look for a meal that has less 700 milligrams less of sodium, since that's pretty much your whole meal. Round it out with a salad and fruit and you're still getting the same amount of sodium. Okay, cured meats, we all know those are loaded with sodium. They also are, because of the nitrates, are considered carcinogenic. So use those in very small amounts. Canned soup, again, you could look at that and see that a cup of that has upwards of 800 milligrams of sodium many times. You eat that whole can and you've got 1,600. Okay, burritos, tacos, and fast food, I'm going to make a quick note of, because you're not going to get a restaurant meal for less than 1,000 milligrams of sodium. Lots of times you're looking at 2 to 3 grams of sodium in that meal. Why? Because salt makes food taste good. So just be very careful with your food choices in restaurants. All right, we talked about reading labels. Look for things like sodium. don't look at the percentage, look at the milligrams. And remember, we said about 700 per meal. Look at sugar, see how much sugar is in that drink you have, and divide it by 5, and you're going to see how many teaspoons of sugar you're getting. Better choice is water. Okay. So we've talked about vegan and vegetarian meals, and there will be some resources at the end of the slides too. One thing I'd like to recommend is looking at going to a library and getting a good cookbook. If you want to learn how to cook Mediterranean foods or vegetarian foods, that's one of the best ways you can do that. Or look online and Google some of those. And now I'd like to turn this over. We've discussed how to eat healthy, but let's take a look at how to access healthy foods in our area from 2 leaders in the community. And the first is Alexis Smith-Schallenberger, and she serves as grants manager for the Jewish Family and Children's Services, and has done this for the last 5 years. So let's welcome Alexis.
Thank you, Bonnie. Let's start with my first slide. We can move those forward. So just a quick brief overview of Jewish Family and Children's Service, or JFCS as we're called. Next slide, please. Our mission is to strengthen the community by providing behavioral health, healthcare, and social services to all ages, faiths, and backgrounds. And we do that 87 years. We've been in bed, deeply rooted in the fabric of the health and human services nonprofits of Maricopa County. We reach everyone from birth to the final stage of life. Children and teens removed from their home, homebound and active adults, the working poor. They're dealing with behavioral health, mental, physical, and social obstacles, domestic violence, family trauma. And last year, we served 43,000 children, youth, and family living in Maricopa County. Forward here. These are our core service areas. Integrated health covers our behavioral health, primary medical clinics, our transition to adulthood programs, various and crisis programs within the hospital. Child and Family Solutions is our child welfare unit. Home-based services are our contracts with DCS for supervised visitation, parent involvement, family reunification. Also covers Shelter Without Walls, or community-based domestic violence support services, real world job development, which is our workforce readiness program for foster care and disconnected youth, and an in-school prevention program as well. Older adult services cover a variety of pieces, but primarily case management, working with older adults to get them safe and being able to age in place in their home. Also a part of that is our Center for Senior Enrichment, which is a virtual platform that serves over, I'd say now, 10,000 older adults age 60 plus with a variety of interactive activities. And we've expanded our reach now beyond Maricopa County and out of state. Jewish Community Services is the backbone of our agency and how we were founded. And those are services specifically for the Jewish community, Jewish counseling services, a career service, and general supports. Our virtual services are telehealth, our hybrid models of our programming, and as I mentioned, our virtual Center for Senior Enrichment. And food security is last but not least, because they tie to everything I've just talked about. Next slide, please. So as you can see, our work reaches beyond race, religion, age, gender, ethnicity, economic status to serve the most vulnerable people in our community. Just 3 things: our food security program. So program need for this, and the statistics cited previously mirror our program. Hunger, diet, and related disease and other risk factors are higher than the national average for Maricopa County residents. Children experience limited or uncertain availability of food, and barriers to achieving a healthy diet, affordable transportation, and low access to stores selling quality food. Risk factors, the social determinants of health tie with food security and healthy eating. Our clients live in a food desert. Among 85% of the county residents, they report sometimes are never being able to pay for basic essentials. That's food, housing, utilities, and basic essentials such as laundry detergent and cleaning supplies. We know that 90% of our clients are working poor. They have wages that barely cover housing. It impacts their quality of life. And oftentimes our clients are just at the level above qualifying for SNAP. Or if they do qualify for SNAP, it's very much a stretch with their budget. We know that from our time in working with food security and insecurity, it can be institutional or temporary, sudden job loss, health problems, or housing relocation. I love word descriptors. I make my living as a writer. And this defines our program. It's strength-based, it's a welcoming culture, it's trauma-informed, it's people helping themselves, connections to community services. We offer client choice. We promote healthy foods. Making connections to the community services are huge for us. Volunteers, inequities and systems change, and new partnerships, and then promoting equity from within. Next slide. So our goal with this program is to impact over 5,000 children, youth, individuals, families receiving services at our healthcare centers, which we have 4 throughout the valley. Oh, back down one, thank you. Our youth for our workforce readiness site. Plus we have 5 programs that access what we call our Just 3 Things distribution hub. We work to make sure our clients can achieve their nutrition and health goals. It includes food insecure temporary sheltered clients and clients birth age to 18 to achieve their goals as well. The next slide, please. Now, we're a client choice model. What makes us different from other food distribution points is that clients can select what they would like to eat, much like a grocery store. Our client choice pantries provide the ability for a wide variety of foods, better enabling our clients to meet their personal dietary needs, promoting healthy options such as low sodium, low sugar, high nutrient content, and ingredients that fit, again, reduced fats and as much as possible. This photo is very indicative of our program and how it switched from one site to serving an entire agency. Those women in the background are the early starters of JFCS, and where we are today, we wouldn't be without them. I'm going to kind of quickly move through a couple of things so our next presenter can do this. But the benefits to this model is that they can shop like a grocery store. It reduces food waste, and it reduces the bond between clients and staff. It builds the bond rather between clients and staff, and our clients feel they're getting what they need. Again, move forward again, please. Our specific projects: no cook bags for temporarily sheltered clients, so it's nutrient easy to eat foods. Breakfast bridge bags, although there are those breakfast programs for kids during the summer, a lot of our clients, their kids don't, it's difficult to access those. And then we also want to make sure that we have infant toddler boxes, newborn to age 4, and kosher soft food and dietary restriction boxes as well. I should note with all of this that we are a shelf-stable or dry pantry. So only one of our sites has a refrigerator and a freezer, and that is our original site where the program started. So we provide the support for somebody that does qualify for SNAP or they're on a budget. We give the specifics that they can access their dairy, their meat and fresh food and vegetables. But we also make sure that anything that we have that's a package can be made with water. And that takes a little bit of doing, but we do it. The same thing for shelf-stable milks and as well, and juices. Next slide, please. We're about finished with it. So we went from, prior to COVID, food donations to 2023, our 80% of the food purchase is now purchased. That gives us flexibility in what we do. Although it's a more expensive operating model, it provides a way more healthier diet for our clients. And I believe I just lost power here. Okay, we're back. So at JFCS, we're making a difference here, offering individual hope, which is quite, goes back to our original mission of what we are here to do today. But with that said, I'd like to move forward and turn it over to Carlos Baez, who is the director of the Sahuarita Food Bank and Community Resource Center.
Alexis, thank you for the presentation or for the introduction. Good afternoon. I want to take this opportunity to thank Banner Health and also the American Heart Association for this presentation. So the Sahuarita Food Bank Community Resource Center, the original primary mission was to feed the community, but what else could we do to help those individuals and families that are coming to our organization? So our mission, it kind of encompasses the food piece, but also addressing root causes. Next slide, please. So our background, we were founded in 2009 through the church right next door to our facility. Our food distribution days are Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays for client flexibility. Again, we want to be flexible because much like Alexis, we are serving the working poor, and many of them cannot make it during the week. So Saturday provides flexibility for families to stop by. Through our Community Resource Center, we're open Monday through Saturday. So the other programs, we have a lot more flexibility to have these programs for our community. So again, our initial mission was feeding the community, but there was a more pressing need. So that's where our Community Resource Center evolved. Next slide, please. So our these are recent statistics. We serve, last year we served about 14,000 unduplicated individuals in our area. So we're about 15 minutes south of Tucson. We're in a suburban area of of Southern Arizona, yet we serve a large portion of our clients come from the Tucson area, but also we serve many rural communities down to the southern border in Arizona. So we see people coming from real food deserts, no grocery stores in their communities, to food deserts more like what Alexis talked about. People have no transportation and cannot get to a grocery store. Last year, we also distributed about 1.5 million pounds of food. What we do is we rescue from 7 different grocery stores 7 days a week. And then we also rescue produce from the international border that would otherwise be discarded in the landfill. You'd be surprised at the amount of produce that comes through the port of entry every single day. And of course, not everything can make it to grocery stores across the country. So this is where organizations like ours go in and collect things that are getting ready to expire, and that's what we distribute. And again, food is a symptom of a greater underlying issue. So I wanted to add that as a statistic. And going back to the individuals and families that we're serving, we serve from Tucson to the southern border. Next slide, please. This is our Community Resource Center. For the purpose of this presentation, I'll just make it brief. Beyond food, we have our workforce component and also our family support. But the primary driver to our organization is health and nutrition. Next slide, please. And recently, we've been collaborating more with our rural partners. So what we've been doing is bringing resources that the communities have been asking, not what we believe that they need, but what the community requests. So basically an extension of what we're doing here in our organization, and there's going to be much more happening in the future. Next slide, please. So again, our primary driver is the food piece in our organization. So food programs and I'll go down the list quickly. Emergency food distribution, which is your TFAP or CSFP. That's your emergency food distribution. Also our pantry visits, which we allow 2 visits a month here. We also have a learning about diabetes and prediabetes program that's been great. We just kicked it off earlier this year. Messin in the Kitchen, that's picture in the center. It's a program for kids to learn how to eat healthy at home using products that are available. And I promise you, those knives that are in the picture are not, they're kids appropriate. It's a culinary set. Healthy cooking. Again, it's what ingredients are available in your community that you can use to eat. And then our backpack program, that picture on the bottom right corner, it's for kids that are free or reduced lunch that would otherwise go hungry. They receive a weekend sack filled with healthy, nutritious items. And then the next item is our school pantry program for those schools that want to participate at a larger scale. And it's usually in areas that have high poverty rates. So we have a partnership with some local schools. Senior food boxes, again, this is a USDA program, which is wonderful. We have a home food delivery program for seniors and those that are homebound. And then we have Pláticas con Cafecito, which is a new program that we've piloted. It's basically bringing people from the community to talk about what they're doing in the kitchen, maybe sharing recipes, and more of a connection piece with COVID-19, the pandemic, not totally behind us, but in the rearview mirror. A lot of people have been isolated, so we want to get them back in the community, and what better way than to talk about things in the kitchen. And then also nourishing neighbors. Anything that we have here that is perishable that we cannot distribute, we share with other local partners so that way they can distribute in their communities. And I believe that concludes my presentation. Dr. Stein, I believe you're going to be taking over the reins. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Carlos, Alexis, and Bonnie. What an engaging presentation with an incredible amount of information about the importance of nutrition and nutritional access in a really short period of time. At this time, we're going to bring back all of our speakers. You can see them for Q&A. And we have some prepared questions for our panelists, but we also want to hear from you. And I wanted to see, before I turn it over to our panelists with our prepped questions, is there anybody in the audience that has a question? And please remember to click everyone from that drop-down menu when typing your questions or comments into that chat so we can see them. And it looks like we have one for Carlos. Carlos, you said you take requests from resources from the rural communities. What are the common requests and needs?
And you know what, this is a question that gets brought up repeatedly. So I'll bring up two perfect examples. One of our communities, the seniors want their mailboxes refurbished. Another community does not want that service. They want referrals for like domestic violence. Yet another community wants, how can you bring child programming around connecting families? So this is where we kind of think outside the box. How can we incorporate food, things that we rescue at the border? And so this is where we don't treat every community the same. We go into communities, we hold an open table discussion. You tell us what you need. We've had requests from Starbucks to Applebee's, but yes, we all want those types of restaurants. But the big thing is, let's think of something tangible that we could bring tomorrow. And so the big thing is listening to the communities that you work with and then build that relationship. And like they say, the saying is build it and they will come. We have a lot of strong partners in the Tucson region. And so we bring those resources down to those rural communities.
Great, I appreciate that great answer, Carlos and Amanda, for the question. Is there anybody else in the audience that has a question? All right, while you're thinking of that, I'm going to turn it over to Bonnie. I have a question for her. If someone has to shop for food at a convenience store, that sounds really hard to me. What are some of the healthier options that they can choose?
Okay, and I have gone to some of the food deserts in Tucson to see what people can buy, what's available, like at convenience stores. They're adding more healthy things now, like they do have healthy frozen meals in their freezer section. There are eggs usually. They carry things, cheeses, cheese sticks, hard-boiled eggs. Again, the price is going to be much higher. I also looked at one of the dollar stores nearby, and I was shocked at the amount of good food people can actually get. You could get things like olive oil, you can get canned tuna, canned chicken, unsweetened juices, all for like $1. Your canned beans, they had lentils, they had rice. So with some careful shopping with convenience stores or these dollar stores, if that's what's in their neighborhood, they can get some good foods. One more thing I wanted to add to delivery. People can't drive, they don't have cars. I found out some of these stores will deliver with a $30 order. They deliver free. So I hope that answered your question.
Thanks for the great answer, Bonnie. I appreciate it. And I see we have another question from Christine. Stress was mentioned as a risk factor. What are some of the ways to help lower stress? So I can start with this high level. I think this could be a whole nother session, but certainly lowering stress depends on the individual. Sometimes it can have to do with your job and how can you make accommodations in your job to lower stress, have less responsibility. If you're working too many hours, how do you make sure you enjoy your work because that lowers stress? Exercise is a great reduction for stress, meditation, other forms of relaxation, reading, walking. Activity is a great intervention for stress. And there actually have been studies about the significant reduction in stress and reduction in anxiety and depression as well. With that being said, I wanted to turn it over to the other panelists to see if they have any other thoughts.
Dr. Stein, I think from a non-medical perspective, we have a lot of families that come in here for food. And I think the stress level decreases when they come in and they're treated not only with dignity and respect, but having a variety of food items, knowing that they have a meal for today, but also for tomorrow, and knowing that they can always come back. That's another stress reliever that we see here. And as they start coming in, the stigma as coming to a food bank, I don't want to say it goes away, but it decreases. And we see stress levels decrease naturally over time.
I would
That's a
have
great-
to,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
well, I would have to agree with Carlos and what he said. The same thing with us. I mean, we have health navigators at our clinics that conduct, and we have a partnership with the Arizona Living Well Institute to conduct classes on chronic disease, diabetes, and things at our healthcare centers. And that also, if someone is assigned a health navigator and our other programs, whatever the title might be of coordinator advocate, they're working one-on-one with that staff member to help look for the other stressors within their life that can reduce the stress. Is it getting your child to school on time? Is it a reduction in the number of hours you're working? Worried about, how you're going to meet rent for the next month because your hours just got reduced. So one of the things like Carlos has that other places don't is we have a connector to resources, both internally and externally. And that I think helps reduce the stress for our clients of their next steps in life, and not just what might be down the road 6 months from now, but what might be presented 6 hours from now.
Great comprehensive answer, as I think that we have more of these sessions coming up. Stress is such a complex but factor we can have influence. I would love for us to be able to have more discussion on that. I'm going to read one more of the questions really quickly. I appreciate all these questions. Is it recommended for someone who is exhibiting high blood pressure readings but states is having or lives a high stress life to start a medication? That one I'm going to say you really have to talk to your PCP or the treating doctor. It's very individualized. It's dependent on the level of stress, how high the blood pressure is, other potential comorbid conditions. And I think that's the comprehensive answer. I hope that answers your question, Crystal. And I'm going to try to take one more really quickly. All of you know, or most of you know, I talk really quickly. Jennifer said transportation seems to be one of the biggest barriers to healthy food access. What are your organizations doing to help address that issue? Boy, I wish that we had much more time to answer that. I know the panelists are doing many things. I know from a health plan perspective, transportation is a covered service for our access or Medicaid members to covered services for getting food. It's more challenging. Does anybody want to give about 30-second addition? And I hope that some of these questions can be continued next session.
Well, one of the ways we work with that, with the transportation barriers, is by having the pantries on site and then at our distribution center. But the other piece is we do provide our clients with lift rides, with bus passes, light rail passes. We do everything possible to make sure their needs are met. And we do have a volunteer corps that help with the food pantry manager to run the food pantry that will actually deliver to a client if needed. So that's just the short and sweet for our program.
Appreciate the short and sweet in the last minute or so that we have in the question, Jennifer. So what I wanted to do now is just thank our participants, our presenters, and of course, the American Heart Association for all their support and leadership. Next week, you'll all get an email with the resources that were included in this presentation, in addition to additional resources. I hope you participate in future webinars, and I just thank you and hope you all have a wonderful day.
Ain't no mountain high enough, ain't no